What really happened in Ricky Nelson's house, which used to be very fancy. The teen idol who became a rock star captivated millions with his singing and good looks. His life took a terrible turn though. From having a picture-perfect family to having problems in his own life, Ricky's story is full of fame, love, and tragedy. His house, his wife, his children, and the money he left behind were all left behind. This American hero rose to fame and then fell from grace. Ricky Nelson, a beloved singer, producer, and former teen idol, died in a terrible plane crash on December 31, 1985. His death shocked the music world. Nelson, his fiancée Helen Blair, and 5 members of his band all died when the Douglas DC-3 plane he owned and was flying in had to make an emergency landing because of a terrible fire in the air. The plane was on its way from Guntersville, Alabama to Dallas, Texas, on that terrible day. Nelson was going to play at a show on New Year's Eve, which was another stop on his comeback tour. Nelson was still a beloved performer with a loyal following, even though his fame had dropped since the late 1950s and early 1960s. He had been working hard to revive his career with live shows all over the country. The plane, a vintage Douglas DC-3, had a long and interesting past and had been an important part of aviation for many years. But by the mid-1980s, it wasn't even close to being cutting edge, and Nelson's particular plane was known to have had many technical problems in the past. People who knew Nelson and worked with him had raised worries about the plane's dependability, and earlier flights had reported engine and electrical problems. The plane was still being used despite these warnings. Things went very badly wrong as the plane flew over to Calb, Texas. There was a fire in the back of the plane, later found to have been caused by a cabin heater in the tail area that wasn't working right. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigators came to the conclusion that the heater, which did not meet current safety standards, started a fire that quickly spread through the cabin. There was probably a lot of fear as smoke filled the fuselage. The pilots were able to get out of the plane before it caught on fire because they could see out the windows of the cockpit. Unfortunately, the 7 people inside, Ricky Nelson, Helen Blair, Andy Chapin, Rick Intfeld, Patrick Woodward, drummer Willie Nelson, not related to Ricky Nelson, and Donald Clark Russell, the road manager, were stuck in the smoke-filled cabin and did not make it out alive. People on the ground said they saw the plane leaving a cloud of smoke behind it before it tried to make an emergency landing in a field outside of DeKalb. The pilots did an amazing job of bringing the plane down, but the fire inside had already spread to the whole cabin. When first rescuers got to the scene of the crash, the plane was already on fire and couldn't be saved. When Nelson's death was announced, it shocked everyone in the music business and among his fans. He became famous as a TV star on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which is where he first showed off his singing skills. Nelson became one of the early rock and roll stars with hits like Hello Mary Lou, Traveling Man, and Poor Little Fool. He became well known during the peak of American pop music with a mix of rockabilly charm and smooth singing. Let's talk about the homes that Ricky Nelson owns now. The Nelson family, led by Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, did something important in the early 1940s that would quietly set the stage for their later fame. At the time, they lived in a quiet East Coast suburb far from the glitz and glitter of Hollywood. They bought a 2-story colonial-style house in Tenafuli, New Jersey, with their 2 young kids, David and Ricky. This cute town in Bergen County, with its tree-lined streets and small-town feel, was a great place to raise a family. The house was very American in style. It was symmetrical and had dark shutters, white clapboard siding, and a front door in the middle that was surrounded by sidelights and a small portico. The house had large rooms, wooden floors, and a formal dining room that was common in homes built at that time. The kitchen was cozy, and the living room was big enough for family meetings. The kitchen, which had original appliances, was the heart of the house. The bedrooms were upstairs. They were not very big, but they were comfortable, and each window had a view of a quiet, leafy area. Ozzie Nelson, who led a band and was a radio personality, and Harriet, who used to sing in a big band and act, found that their home was a good mix between the growing demands of show business and the duties of being a parent. David and Ricky went to neighborhood schools and had pretty normal childhoods, living away from the fame they would soon know so well. During these important years in Tenafly, Ozzie and Harriet kept working in show business. Ozzie was in charge of his band and made radio shows, and Harriet sometimes played with him. Because they were so famous on the radio, especially when they were on the Red Skelton Show, they eventually got their own show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which started airing across the country in 1944. As the family became more famous and the show's needs grew, living on the East Coast became less and less possible. As The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet became more popular in the middle of the 1940s, it became clear that the family's future lay in Hollywood. It was decided that the Nelsons would move to California. They wanted to be close to the theater business, which was quickly becoming their family business. They had quietly lived in the Tenefoli house for the first few years of their lives as a family and as up-and-coming artists. The Tenefoli house was still an important part of their story, even after they moved west and became famous all over the country, especially when their radio show switched to TV in the 1950s. It reminded us of a time before fame, when family life was based on daily routines, weekend trips, and pursuing artistic goals. In many ways, their home in New Jersey set the stage for the good, perfect family life they would later show on TV and in movies. As Ozzie and Harriet Nelson's jobs as entertainers were taking off in November 1941, they made a big decision that would affect their personal lives and how people would always see them. The couple bought a cute two-story green and white Cape Cod colonial house at 1822 Camino Palmero Street in Los Angeles' Hollywood Hills. The house was in a quiet domestic area close to the busy center of Hollywood. The Nelson family lived there for decades, and it became an important part of American television history. The Cape Cod-style home on Camino Palmero stood out with its steeply pitched roof, white clapboard siding with green trim, dormer windows, and a friendly front door framed by shutters and a small overhang. The house was warm and welcoming, and it had a classic storybook feel that was similar to what the Nelsons would later show millions of American families. Inside, the house had large living rooms, walls made of wood paneling, and cozy spots that made you feel like you were at home with your family. The house quickly became more than just a private family home as Ozzie and Harriet moved in with their two sons, David and Ricky. It became a sign of mid-century family bliss over time. When The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which started as a radio show in the 1940s and became a groundbreaking TV show in 1952, this picture got stronger. Ozzie was very creative when he chose to show the outside of their real house at 1822 Camino Palmero in the show's opening credits. This made the show seem more real. Fans felt like they were stepping into the real lives of the Nelson family every week thanks to this clever touch that crossed the line between reality and fiction. Behind the scenes, the house was still a real hub of activity and creation. The Camino Palmero house was where Ricky Nelson grew up. He went on to become a teen star and a pioneering rock and roll artist. As his musical skills grew, his family changed some parts of the land to accommodate his needs. Reports say that Ricky turned the pool house, which is separate from the main house, into his own recording studio. There, away from the noise of the main house and the attention of the public, Ricky wrote many of the songs that would make him famous as a musician. The room gave him privacy and freedom to experiment with his sound, which was a mix of early rock influences and pop sensibilities that spoke to a whole generation. The house at 1822 Camino Palmero wasn't just a TV set or a place for famous people. It's where real memories were made. The family's daily life included holiday get-togethers, backyard parties, and quiet nights. It also showed the unique problems that came with fame, especially for Ricky, who had to deal with the difficulties of growing up in the sunlight from inside those walls. Ricky Nelson, who was famous as a teen hero, a rock and roll pioneer, and a TV star, later in life focused on more strategic ways to make money, such as investing in real estate. Nelson knew how important it was to make sure he had a variety of sources of income in order to be financially stable in the long term, even though he became famous as the youngest member of Ozzie and Harriet, and later made a name for himself with a great music career. A fancy house in the Hollywood Hills was one of his most famous real estate purchases, an investment that showed how his lifestyle was changing and how smart he was becoming as a businessman. Like many other homes in that exclusive neighborhood, the Hollywood Hills property had sweeping views of Los Angeles, was out of the public eye, and was close to the showbiz world that had shaped much of his life. The house was said to be a large and modern estate with high ceilings, large windows, and beautiful finishes that were popular in modern design in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The home, which was a mix of comfort and glitz, was both a place for him to relax and a sign of his success. There were also quiet times with family and close friends there, as well as a place to get away from the stresses of everyday life. When Ricky invested in real estate, he didn't just buy one house. Besides buying a house in the Hollywood Hills, he also bought other properties all over Southern California, slowly building up a collection that quietly went up in value. Nelson saw ahead of time that the Los Angeles housing market would go up because of rising demand, a lack of available homes, and the city's appeal to both creatives and workers. The money he made from these sites became very important to him, even more so because his singing career had the normal ups and downs. Nelson's real estate deals helped him keep his wealth even though he was having problems in his personal and professional life, such as financial problems from touring and legal problems linked to bad management in the past. He felt safe and secure in his homes, and they also turned out to be good investments for his money. During the 1980s, property prices in Los Angeles went through the roof. The equity he built up made a big dent in his net worth. Nelson's ability to switch between performing and investing showed a calmer, more practical side of him that was often overshadowed by his fame as a singer and heartthrob. He felt in charge of his future by investing in real estate, which gave him financial protection and left a legacy for his children. Even though he lived a life shaped by how people saw him and the fact that he was famous, these investments were very personal and useful. They made sure that he would have something real to leave behind. Are you interested in his personal life? In 1957, when he was only 17, Ricky Nelson was the biggest star of his generation. With his role on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, and his music career that was quickly taking off, he was America's teenage hero. But behind the clean-cut picture that was shown in millions of homes every week, Ricky was just a young man who was meeting real women for the first time. In the same year, he met Marianne Gaba, a beautiful and lively young actor and model who was cast to play his girlfriend on the show in 3 episodes. Gaba was known for being naturally beautiful and charming. She went on to become Miss Illinois and model for Playboy. When they weren't on TV together, her attraction to Ricky quickly turned into a real teenage crush. Gaba says that even though they were too young to be seriously dating and still figuring out their own fame and identities, there was an obvious spark between them. She says that even though they were young, their relationship was passionate in its own way. In a later conversation, she talked about how they used to neck for hours and loved the time they spent together. It was a typical teenage romance, short, intense, and full of feelings. But it made an impact on Ricky at a time in his life when he was open to change. When Ricky met Lori Collins the next year in 1958, his heart was broken again, but this time more seriously. Lori was only 15 years old at the time, but she was already a well-known artist. She was best known for her work with her brother Larry as part of the country rockabilly duo, the Collins Kids. She was a regular on Town Hall Party, a weekly entertainment show on TV that praised country and western music. Ricky couldn't stay away from Lori's spark. She was smart, skilled, and loved music as much as he did. They were connected in more ways than one. In a way that felt deep, especially for teenagers, they connected artistically and emotionally. Their friendship quickly turned into a passionate love story. They worked together to write Ricky's first song, a touching song called My Gal. Lori wasn't just friend of mine. She gave them ideas and helped them connect with other people in the country music world. She put Ricky in touch with famous musicians like Johnny Cash and Tex Ritter, which had a small but significant effect on the direction of his music. Lori also had a memorable guest role on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet as Ricky's girlfriend in a sweet episode. They sang Just Because together at the end of the show. Their harmony reflected the love they had for each other off-screen. When they were together, things got serious enough that they started talking about getting married, which was a big step for 2 such young stars. But their parents strongly told them not to take that risk, because they knew how hard it was to be in love when you're young and how hard it is to be in show business. In the end, the difficulties of fame, youth and family influence were too much for their close relationship to handle. The love slowly faded, but Ricky and Lori would both always remember that time with warmth. Ricky Nelson, who was 21 years old at the time and already famous from his music and TV work, started dating someone around Christmas 1961. This relationship would have a huge impact on his life for the next 20 years. He began dating Kristen Harmon, a calm and beautiful young woman with a history in Hollywood. Kevin Harmon was born on June 25, 1945. She was the daughter of famous college football player and sportscaster Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox. She was also related to Mark Harmon and Kelly Harmon, who would go on to become actors. This made the family even more well-known in the close-knit world of show business. Their friendship had been going on for a long time. During the golden age of Hollywood, both families were in the same social groups, where fame, glitz, and traditional family values all came together. It seemed like Rick and Chris were meant to be together, or at least that their families really wanted them to. Not only did they both come from well-off and famous families, but they were also quiet and thoughtful people who often felt out of place in the public eye. Perhaps even more important, both Ricky and Kristen had strong, influential fathers whose standards shaped their choices and how they moved forward. They were dating very quickly. As of April 20, 1963, Rick and Chris were married in a service that felt rushed. Chris was having a baby. Later, Rick would honestly call it a shotgun wedding, even though they seemed to really love each other. Kristen's religious Catholic parents pushed Rick, who used to be a non-practicing Protestant, to take religious classes and agree to raise their children in the Catholic faith. He even made a written promise to do that. Even though it meant a big change in Rick's life, he seemed ready to give in for love and to please his new in-laws. Soon after they got married, Kristen became a regular cast member on Ozzie and Harriet in 1963. She mixed her real-life part as Rick's wife with the scripted idealized portrayal of the Nelson family on TV.
Tracy Christine Nelson became an actress on her own. Their twin sons Gunnar Eric Nelson and Matthew Gray Nelson went on to form the famous pop rock band Nelson, and their youngest child Sam Hilliard Nelson was born to them. In public, they seemed like the picture of perfect family unity, but behind closed doors, their marriage was getting worse. In 1975, not long after Sam was born, the relationship had grown apart into a chasm. Chris became more and more unhappy with Rick's touring life and the demands of his music business. She wanted him to focus on acting more and stay home with the kids. She hoped that by doing this, they could have the stable family life they both wanted. Unfortunately, their expensive way of life and Chris's tendency to spend a lot of money meant that Rick had to keep traveling to pay their bills. Because of the stress that built up, the house became hostile, arguments turned nasty, and communication stopped working. Kristen asked for custody of their 4 children, alimony, and a share of their joint property when she filed for divorce in 1977. Even though they got back together for a short time, Chris eventually hired a lawyer and moved forward with the court process. During this time, her problems with alcoholism got worse, and she depended more and more on housekeepers to take care of the kids. After years of emotional turmoil, court battles, and failed efforts to settle the matter, the divorce was finalized in December 1982. Ricky lost a huge amount of money. Bills and lawyers cost more than $1 million. In addition to the money that was lost, the divorce left deep mental scars on both families, but especially on Ricky, who carried these scars with him until the end of his life. The court battles went on for years, casting a long shadow over a marriage that had once seemed like something out of a fairy tale, between 2 of Hollywood's golden kids. In 1980, Ricky Nelson met a woman who would become his best friend in the last few years of his life. She met him while he was on tour with a new band and new energy. Helen Blair was her name, and she was a part-time model and unusual animal trainer that he met in Las Vegas. Getting to know each other would be the start of a highly committed, if controversial relationship, one that would last until their unexpected deaths 5 years later. From the start, Helen Blair became a part of Ricky's life. It didn't take long for her to become his regular traveling companion, going to concerts and other events with him. She had become more than just his love partner by the time she moved in with him full-time in 1982. Blair worked for him as his personal helper, managing his routine, making sure everything runs smoothly, and being the main point of contact for his loyal fan club. Ricky's life was getting more and more complicated as he dealt with money problems, divorce-related court cases, and the constant demands of performing. She brought order and care to his life. Even though Helen worked hard and was always there, not everyone liked how she became a part of Ricky's personal and business life. His mother, Harriet Nelson, his brother David, and his business and talent managers, as well as other important people in his life, didn't trust or like her. They asked her how much power she had over Ricky, how involved she was in his business, and if her goals were really in his best interests. Some people saw her as controlling or too aggressive, and the problems between Helen and Ricky's close friends and family made it hard for his family to get along. Reports say that Ricky thought about marrying Helen, but in the end he chose not to. Maybe the criticism from his family had something to do with it, or maybe his painful split from Kristen Harmon made him hesitant to get married again. Even so, his relationship with Helen stayed strong. She was there for him during hard years when he had to rebuild his business and deal with personal problems, offering support and company when others had pulled away. Tragically, Helen Blair and Ricky died on December 31, 1985, when the plane they were on fell and caught fire on its way to a show in Dallas, Texas for New Year's Eve. Everyone on board died except for the 2 pilots. Even though Helen was very important to Ricky in his last years, she was noticeably missing from his wake. Her name wasn't mentioned, which showed that the Nelson family, especially Harriet, was still angry and didn't like her. After the crash, Helen's parents asked that she be buried next to Ricky at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. They thought this would honor their bond, but Harriet Nelson strongly disagreed with the idea. The Blair family did not bury Helen's body because they felt hurt and left out. Instead, they sued Ricky Nelson's estate for $2 million for wrongful death, hoping that the estate would be held responsible and maybe even recognize how important their daughter was in his life. In the end, they only got a small amount of money as a settlement, which was a quiet and unsatisfying end to their painful experience. Ozzie and Harriet Nelson had 2 sons. Ricky Nelson was their second child. He was born into a family with a history in show business. His father, Ozzie, was a smooth and smart bandleader with some Swedish roots, and his mother, Harriet, was a beautiful singer who often sang with her husband's orchestra. David Nelson, Ricky's older brother and born in 1936, would also become an actress and be an important part of the Nelson family's history in show business. When Ricky was young, his family lived in Englewood, New Jersey, a town in the suburbs. Harriet stayed home to take care of their 2 young kids while Ozzie went on tour with the Nelson Orchestra. The Nelsons bought a cute 2-story colonial house in nearby Tenafoli, New Jersey, so they could be more settled in family life. But their home life in the Garden State would not last long. Ozzie and Harriet moved to Hollywood only 6 months after buying the Tenafoli house. They were offered regular roles on Red Skelton's The Raleigh Cigarette Hour from 1941 to 1942. This was a big business move that sent them west. David and his family went to the West Coast, but baby Ricky stayed in New Jersey with his paternal grandmother. The Nelsons lived in that way until November 1941 when they bought a green and white 2-story Cape Cod colonial home at 1822 Camino Palmero Street in Los Angeles that would become their permanent home. Ricky moved there with his family when he was only 2 years old, in 1942. Ricky had health problems in his early years in California. He was a little kid who felt timid and had bad asthma. His illness made it hard for him to sleep a lot of the time. At night, a vaporizer that gave off a tincture of evergreen helped him relax. The smell reminded him of his youth. Ricky had a quiet, attractive charm that made people want to be around him. A director for Red Skelton named John Guettel later said that he was a strange kid, adding that he was likable but strange, shy, introspective, and hard to figure out. When Red Skelton was called up to serve in the military during World War II in 1944, Guettel saw a chance to put Ozzie and Harriet in the spotlight. He made the radio show The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which was a dramatization of the couple's everyday life. When it first aired on October 8, 1944, the show got good reviews. Ozzie became the main writer for the songs and added made-up stories based on his two boys' often funny and relatable antics to the scripts. The voices of the Nelson boys on the radio show were first done by paid child actors. However, on February 20th, 1949, David, 12, and Ricky, 8, started the show on their own. Invitation to Dinner, their first episode, was the start of their public careers as performers. It also set the stage for a family brand that would become a culture phenomenon. The next big step was when, in 1952, they tried their hand at TV with a movie called Here Come the Nelsons. The movie was a big hit, and Ozzie felt confident enough to turn his popular radio show into a TV show. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet first aired on TV on October 30, 1952. The show was a first of its kind because it mixed scripted family comedy with the Nelsons' real lives. It was both fun and a kind of reality TV that came before it. The show ran until September 30, 1966, making it one of the longest-running comedies in TV history. People all over the world watched Ricky grow up on TV for 14 years, from being shy as a child to becoming a teen idol, and then to a young man starting his own singing career through the show. By the time he was in school, Ricky Nelson had already established a family home in Los Angeles, where he went to school. He first went to Gardner Street Public School, a simple school for the kids of working-class Hollywood parents. Later he went to Bancroft Junior High School, which was closer to the entertainment area. Ricky went to Hollywood High School from 1954 to 1958. It is a famous school with a lot of famous alumni and is close to the music and movie businesses. Ricky kept a B average while he was at Hollywood High. This was a great academic record considering how busy he was with his rising fame and music business. Nelson later admitted that he hated school, even though he had good grades. In an interview with Los Angeles Weekly in the 1980s, he told them straight out that he hated it because it made him wake up early and smelled like pencils. His discomfort in traditional academic situations was shown by two complaints that didn't seem important. Ricky may not have liked school because he wanted artistic freedom and a life that was very different from the typical teenage routine. Still, Nelson was used to being involved in things outside of school. At Hollywood High, he used his speed to play football and tennis against other schools, showing a competitive side that was different from the quiet person he seemed to be. Ricky's energy could be released through sports, which also helped him deal with the stresses of being a young star. A trapeze act was one of the most memorable ways Ricky showed off his physical skills and acting skills. In an episode of The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet on January 27, 1960, called The Circus, Ricky and his bigger brother David did a trapeze routine that showed how agile and showy they were. The act wasn't just a trick. For the brothers, it was a nod to their love of adventure and their bond as family and performers. Ozzie Nelson, Ricky's proud father, went to Rutgers University and strongly believed in the value of higher education. He hoped that his boys would follow in his academic footsteps. But for Ricky, college didn't seem like a good idea. By the time he was 18, he was already making more than most college graduates could ever dream of and was taxed at 93%. A music career that was taking off was more appealing than a future in academia, nor with the fact that he makes a lot of money and is famous. In fact, Ricky started making money early and quickly grew it. He was making over $100,000 a year when he was only 13. That was a huge amount of money back then. By the time he was 16, he had a wealth of $500,000, which is about $5.78 million today. His parents were very good with their money. They put his earnings into trust funds to make sure he would be stable in the future. Even though the numbers were impressive, lived with strict financial control. Even though he was 18, Ozzie and Harriet only gave him a $50 allowance every week.
They did this to teach him control and stop him from spending money without thinking. Because of this tight control, Ricky sometimes ran out of money. One sad story he told was about how he and a date would pick up and return empty soda bottles for extra change so they could afford movie tickets. Ricky was a millionaire on paper, but he often felt forced to be humble, which kept him grounded. He may have even been a little angry at the systems that held him back. Ricky Nelson's teen years were a study in opposites, with public success and private problems. There is both glitz and simplicity, order and chaos. He made his own path, one that was shaped as much by his skills as by the world he was born into. He had to balance fame, school, sports, and family demands. How do you feel about Ricky Nelson? Please tell us what you think in the box below. We hope this video was helpful for you. If you liked the show, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Glad you watched, and see you in the next film. Thank you.